days. Paul Rykov is here, host of the Independent Americans podcast, co-founder of American Veterans for Ukraine. And I guess this would be the highest-ranking Russian since the war in Ukraine started to visit. Good sign, bad sign, no sign of anything progress-wise? What do you think?
I think most importantly, there's nothing done.
Yeah.
I think there have been a lot of signs, a lot of potential, a lot of ups and downs, but at the end of the day, the slaughter in Ukraine still continues and there's no peace. You know, Trump famously said he was going to end this in his first couple of days. Well, that hasn't happened. And this quagmire, this ongoing war in Eastern Europe continues. Just last night, there was another round of drone attacks on Ukrainian civilians. And we haven't really seen the ball move forward at the end of the day. And interestingly, Trump is now ratcheting up his rhetoric, threatening increased sanctions against Russia, which I think is somewhat of a realization that Putin's not moving here. And he's going to have to do more to bring Putin to the table and get him to stop the slaughter.
The other story in that part of the world this week that maybe is not getting as much attention as it should, but I know you would talk about it and would be focused on it, are these American soldiers found dead in Lithuania. I know you've been focused on that. What should we be thinking about there?
I think most of all that we have men and women in harm's way that are serving, being wounded, and dying on a pretty regular basis, even if it's just in a training accident like this. 4 young American soldiers out of the place I used to be stationed at Fort Stewart in Georgia. They're all in their 20s, and they were lost, you know, serving their country, training in Eastern Europe in a place most people probably didn't even know we had troops. But I think it's a reminder of how dangerous it is to serve in our military, and also kind of a reflection on how all this other chaos sometimes swallows up what should be very important to us. This would be front page news, you know, a couple months ago, a couple years ago, but now it's almost buried beneath all the other headlines. So we've got to remember these soldiers and their families. I encourage folks to reach out to TAPS and other charities that help them in this important time, and remember that our folks are in harm's way, even in the midst of all the other political drama.
Yeah, I know you've done a lot of work over the years to help veterans in many, many cases. Speaking of veterans, Senator Gallego from Arizona, who's a veteran, I believe himself, he was speaking out about all the cuts that you and I have spoken about at the VA and said this. Watch.
Putting a hold on all political appointees at the VA. Why? Well, I'm concerned that they're trying to cut 88,000 employees from the VA. There's no plan of what this means, how this is going to affect services. You know, we actually need to be hiring more people, not firing people.
So he's putting a hold on these political appointees.
I tweeted this. I said, that's the spirit. I think people want to see someone fighting back specifically on the cuts against the Department of Veterans Affairs, which also means cutting veterans. You know, it's 83,000 people, probably more than a third of them, maybe as much as a half of them themselves will be veterans. And we want to see somebody pushing back, whether it's a Democrat or Republican or someone else, but especially a fellow veteran. Gallego served as a Marine. He's talked about the troubles of coming home from war and how important that is. And I think this is an example of how the DOGE plan and the Trump agenda seems to be short-sighted. They're not offering them an off-ramp. There's no place for them to go to get jobs if they're laid off. And there's not a real discussion about what this is going to mean for services and care at the VA, and that's everybody's concern.
It's interesting as a final point that you use the term fighting back. I've heard that a lot lately. I was thinking back to, you know, Cory Booker speaking on the floor of the Senate for over a day and setting the record, or Gallego in this case. Is any of this or all of this resonating now, do you think? Or, you know, this resistance or this ability to push back against Trump?
I think it is. I think this is a really specific example where it'll be welcomed by a lot of people. Cutting veterans and cutting the Department of Veterans Affairs is extremely unpopular across partisan lines of all backgrounds. And people want to see someone pushing back on that and challenging it, saying, what's your larger strategic plan? How is this going to impact my benefits, my ability to get care at my local VA? And like the cuts themselves, this is very localized. This means jobs in places across the country, and people are really going to feel it. And it's a way where, you know, all politics is local.
Right.
This is as local as it gets when you start cutting veteran jobs in local VA facilities. And people want to see anybody fighting back against that and asking tough questions. And nobody better than a former Marine himself.
All right, thank you, Paul. We'll see you next week. Paul Rykov with us. Now, we built it up as a